Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I want to welcome everyone to our 24th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by a new book, actually, the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. Talks all about sacrifices and talk about the holidays, some other things, but a lot of it has to do with the sacrificial system, which we're going to hopefully speak about tonight. So here the Torah says, chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "He shall wash its innards and its feet with water, and the Kohen shall cause it to go up in smoke on the altar, a burnt offering, a fire offering, a satisfying aroma to Hashem." So we talk about a korban olah, a sacrifice that goes up, literally. It goes up and it's a total burnt offering. Nobody eats it, no one gets benefit from it. It goes straight up to satisfying aroma to Hashem, and it's totally burnt, right? So says the Torah over here. So we have to understand, when the Torah speaks about sacrifices, what exactly, try and go a little bit deeper, what exactly the reason is for the sacrifices in the first place. So it comes along the Ramban. So the Ramban says, in this case of an olah, of a sacrifice that was totally burnt up, right? It had to be sacrificed for the sake of to be burnt up, right? It's not going to, you have to have intention for that. It's not going to no one's going to get benefit from it, and it gets totally burnt up, and there's a pleasant aroma, that goes to, it goes to God, so to speak, right? We'll have to see maybe a little bit what that means. And so the Ramban says that's explained. That's how Rashi explains. But the Ramban says he doesn't explain what does it mean for the sake of the fire. In other words, if you light this sacrifice up and you do it for the sake of the fire, it doesn't explain what it means. So it means, says the Ramban, that you sacrifice it for the sake that it's going to go up in flames. It's going to be for the sake that it's going to be burnt up and no one's going to eat it. For no other reason, right? That's it. You're doing it for the sake of it being burnt. Right? That's what seemed the Ramban says. So then the Ramban goes further and explains why or what the basis is for doing sacrifices. Now let's keep in mind, the Ramban lived after the temple, obviously, lived in 1100, 1200s. So that was after certainly the Talmud was sealed, and that was after the Gaonim, after the time of the rabbinic scholars, after the Tanaim and Amoraim, after the early rabbis, the later rabbis, etc. So he came on later. The Ramban came after this, and the Ramban quotes the Rambam. The Ramban quotes the Rambam. What does it mean over here that God got benefit? God got pleasure from this aroma. So he quotes the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide for the Perplexed. Now the Rambam, anyone who doesn't know, wrote the Guide for the Perplexed. It was a philosophical work he wrote in Arabic, which was translated into Hebrew, and then was translated into English. Extremely difficult work. Because again, it's philosophical English, which is translated from the Hebrew, from the Arabic. Nonetheless, the Rambam wrote a work explaining Jewish philosophy in order to answer up the secular philosophers of his time that were taking away Jewish people with the secular philosophy. So the Rambam wrote a work in order to counteract these other, philosophical works and to answer up for the Torah. It's not really so much in vogue today. Some people do learn it or learn some of it. Mostly, we don't have philosophers today, so mostly this generation is only about, desire and wanting to do whatever you want to do, when you want to do it. So we're not looking at Rhodes Scholar, philosophers over here. Nonetheless, the Ramban over here quotes the Rambam, quotes the Rambam. Anyone who wants to look at the Rambam in the Guide for the Perplexed, it's chapter 3, or book 3, chapter 3, 46. That's where it is. So the Rambam in the Guide for the Perplexed says, what's the reason for the sacrifices? Because you had the Egyptians, you had the Chaldeans, that the Jewish people lived. They lived by the Egyptians, they lived in Ur Kasdim, right? That's where Abraham came from, or that was the area of the Fertile Crescent. They lived in those lands, and they worshipped animals, right? They worshipped sheep, they worshipped cows, etc. As he says, the Egyptians worshipped the sheep, the Kasdim, the Kasdians worshipped, demons, he says, that were in the form of rams, or goats. And even today, he says in Hodu, right, which is India, he says even in India today, they don't kill cows, right? You don't kill, use every part of the cow. You don't kill them. They worship the cows. So we can't make burgers out of them, right? Until this very day. So the Rambam says because of that, God commanded us to kill these animals and to sacrifice them to God. You should sacrifice them for Him. Because what's the issue? The issue is the essence of the transgression of what these people were doing and using the animals for sacrifices. So here you're going to take the animals and you're going to bring them up to me. I'm going to use them for a higher purpose. Instead of worshiping the animals, we're going to use the animals to worship God. And that will atone for our sins, right? We know that, or if you don't know, some of the offerings that are given are sin offerings, right? If a person did something wrong, whatever it was, right, he'd have to bring a sin offering. So the offering itself is an atonement, not that you are worshiping it. Remember, before the Jews come out of Egypt, so Moshe tells them, they have to take their sheep and they have to kill it in front of their eyes. They're going to take the blood from the sheep and put it on the doorpost, on the lintels. So when God passes over, when He kills the firstborn, pass over. He's going to pass over and give. And when He sees the blood on the house of the Jews, He's going to pass over them and kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. That was like the final thing that the Jewish people have to go through in order to get out of Egypt. So the people say, "What, are you kidding? Mo, how can we do such a thing? How can we kill their God in front of their face and not have repercussions?" So Moshe Rabbeinu says, true, it's not going to be an easy thing, and because it's not going to be an easy thing, God still wants you to do it. Otherwise, you don't come out. So imagine after all the miracles and all the trials and tribulations and the difficulty they have in Egypt, God says, I got one more thing. In order for you to get out, this is what you have to do. You don't want to do it, you don't get out. So the point, and we actually, the Shabbos before Passover is called Shabbos HaGadol. It's called the Great Shabbos. And normally the rabbi of that congregation will speak about the laws of Passover, and we'll speak about, homiletic interpretation as well, maybe of the Haggadah, of other things, but it'll speak on two different things. One is, according to Jewish law, halachic aspect, some halachic aspects of Passover could be talking about koshering utensils, could be talking about nullifying chametz, any leavened product, whatever. We can talk about a number of topics, and then speak about something more homiletic about, about coming out of Egypt and what it represents, and something from the Haggadah, right? Something like that. Usually gives a talk about that on the Shabbos before Passover. So that's called, why is it called Shabbos HaGadol? Because of the great miracle that occurred. What's the great miracle? The great miracle occurred that the Jewish people killed the sheep in front of the eyes of the Egyptians, killed their God in front of them, and they couldn't do anything. Right? And that was part of the, part of coming out of Egypt. If they didn't do that, that was the last thing they had to do in order to get out. So according to the Ramban says, Rambam makes it clear, since they worship these animals, and even in India, not only they worship it, but they certainly don't kill it, no question. You can't make, burgers or whatever. Nonetheless, because they worship it, God says, you know what? I'm going to show I am the true God. You're going to take these animals and you're going to bring them to me. And you're going to sacrifice them in the temple. In the Mishkan, as it was, and in the temple, as it became later. So you're going to take these three animals that the nations worshipped, and because they worshipped it, you are going to now slaughter them and bring them as offerings to me. Even more, he says. Not just, offerings, but even sin offerings. Even if a person did something wrong, we're obligated to bring a sacrifice. The sacrifice itself is an atonement. Not just that they worshipped it, and we're going to say, oh, you worshipped it, we're going to use the sacrifice to God. Right? And God's going to find, it's going to be pleasant to him. Whatever that means. But if a person did something wrong, and you have to bring this type of sacrifice, well, guess what? You're going to get atonement from the sacrifice itself that was used for idolatry. Right? That's what the Ramban says. And that's going to draw you closer to God as well. Because when you see this animal go up and used as a sacrifice, it's going to draw you closer. Right? We'll speak about that. And it's going to atone for your sins. So that's what the Rambam says. Comes along the Ramban. The Ramban says, I don't understand at all what the Rambam is talking about. How in the world could he say such a thing? If they believe in idols, and they worship these things, the fact that they worshipped it, I should take it and then sacrifice it to God, is a why. Why should I do that? Why does that make so much sense? The Ramban says, I don't understand. He says, I don't understand what the Rambam means. It's a good thing to take what they worshipped and I'm going to use it. He said a lot of sense it doesn't make. So comes along the Ramban. And the Ramban says, before we get to the Ramban, just mention one thing. And that is, even when the temple's rebuilt, right? We pray every day, 3 times a day, that the temple gets rebuilt. Temple gets rebuilt, guess what? We'll go back to sacrifices. So we're already, more than 3,000 years from the destruction of the temple. It sounds like, a very pagan type of thing, slaughtering animals. Sounds medieval. Or it doesn't, even though there was prayer at the same time as sacrifices were brought. So it wasn't like, we have no sacrifices anymore because we have no temple. So because we have no temple, there's nothing to do. There was always prayer. Prayer definitely existed. So it filled a vacuum that was left when there were no sacrifices because the temple was destroyed. So you had sacrifices, but you had prayer. It's not like you had one without the other. Therefore they went hand in hand. So then comes, so need to preface that in order now to see the Ramban. So the Ramban here continues, and he says that what's the purpose of sacrifices? He says the purpose of sacrifices is something that's very hidden. Right? He calls it a sod ne'elam. Ne'elam means it's hidden. Right? Sod means Whatever, it means something that's hidden here. Right? Kabbalistic intention is called sod, as well. Now it's interesting, the Ramban says, brings down from the Medrash, brings down from the Talmud, that he says that by sacrifices, when sacrifices over here in the Torah are written, it doesn't say, when it says God, sorry, let's say it better. When it says God's name, what name is used? It's not used, the word kel, strength, power, it's not used. The word Elokecha, like the Lord your God, it's not used. The word Elokim is not used, that's God of judgment. The word Shakai is not used. What name of God is used? Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Right? What we call the Shema Meyucha, the special name of God, the God of compassion. Right? The name Hashem. Why? Says the Ramban. So, you shouldn't give people the opportunity to disagree. What do you mean? What does it mean? You won't have people that'll disagree. If you're telling me it's about judgment, about other things, people say, well, why is it for that? Maybe if it's something else. If it's God of compassion, people aren't going to argue. Right? Maybe they'll say the whole purpose of sacrifices was what? To eat. Right? Some of them, we did eat the sacrifices. So he says, you learn out, not that way. So, what was the purpose? As it says over there, what is the purpose of the sacrifice? So you'll say, you're doing it for my sake. In other words, the purpose of sacrifices here are for the sake of God. That's it. No other reason. No ulterior motive. Not because God's angry. Not because he wants to show his power. Not for any of these things. Right? So that would somewhat uproot the Rambam. Because what did the Rambam say? That if you have these animals that were worshipped, in here God's showing that they're nothing, they're not going to be worshipped, and I'm going to use these animals so they can be sacrificed to me. So if they're going to be sacrificed to me, maybe it shows my power over them. No. Says the Ramban, that's not the point. The point is, even if these things were used for idolatry, what's the purpose of sacrificing? Purpose of sacrificing is to draw yourself close to God. You're doing it because God told you to do it. It's his will. So the Talmud over there says, yeah, why are you doing it? For God's will. Also, he brings down a medrash. Every time the medrash says, use the word korban, the word korban, right, we translate it as sacrifice, but what's the root of the word korban? The root of the word is kuf resh beis. It means to draw close. Like likarev, to draw close. When you see the word korban, when you see the word sacrifice, what is it attached with? The name Hashem. In order that we won't give heretics an opportunity to say anything. Because maybe the sacrifice is for a different reason. Maybe it's for the sake of food. Maybe it's, any number of reasons. Right? So you're doing it for what reason? You're doing it for his sake. Now, sacrifices, the Ramban continues, that says like this, the thoughts of a person, in other words, when a person does something, he does an action, whatever the action is, whether it's good or whether it's bad, what does he do? He thinks about it, makes a conclusion, and then he speaks and does whatever that conclusion was. So God here commands, okay, you transgressed, you did something wrong. What do you have to do? Now you have to bring a sacrifice. So you bring the sacrifice, you place your hands on it. You place your hands on the animal. That's called smicha, right? Smicha also we translate today as rabbinic ordination, even though it certainly wasn't the same, today as it was in the time when the temple existed. Nonetheless, we're not going to go into that. It's a whole different topic. But the Ramban here says you put your hands on the animal and you confess. You say, I've done something wrong, whatever it is. I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. And you're going to bring this sacrifice. What happens? The sacrifice gets burnt up, right? It gets destroyed. And why does it get destroyed? What does it correspond to? Let's say it better. It corresponds to destroying your bad thoughts, your bad desires. That's an amazing thing. So what is he saying? So the Ramban here says that the main source of a person, if they do something wrong, is really the heart causes you to go astray. Right? Your eyes desire, and your heart sort of seals the deal. Your heart sees something that it wants, or thinks something that you shouldn't, or whatever, and then it goes to your heart, and then you do it. So everything stems from the mind, comes from your thoughts. When you finish the thought and you say, yeah, it's a good thing, or you're convinced it's a good thing, whatever it is, then you take 3 running steps, and then you conclude and do it. Right? You're already really not concluding, you've already done it. Right? You've made the conclusion, then you go and run and do it. So where does it start from? It starts right here. Starts here, goes out. Right? Thought, heart, action. So the Ramban here says that when this animal is going to go up, and this animal is going to be a burnt offering, it means the whole thing gets destroyed. No benefit. Right? You can't roast marshmallows next to it. You can't use this fire for anything. And, none of the animal for anything either. And that brings a pleasing smell to God. Because you're getting atonement for whatever you've done wrong. So it corresponds to your thoughts and your desires. And the legs, what do they correspond to? The legs of the animal. It corresponds to your legs, your arms of a person who did the action. Then what do you do after that? You sprinkle the blood. What does the blood correspond to? It corresponds to the blood in your soul. The person should think everything he did, he sinned to the Lord his God with his body and with his soul. Now, we'll stop there for 1 second. Right? Body and soul together. Now remember, you go back to Genesis. In the book of Genesis, when God creates man, he puts in the spirit of life. Right? He puts in the soul. So the soul, the Targum says, the Aramaic translation says, it's called the Ruach Mamalelo. Right? The spirit that speaks. Right? That's part of the soul, at least of a Jew. Right? It's got 5 different aspects of the soul. A non-Jew has less. Right? But the soul gives this body the ability to speak. Now, keep in mind, the soul comes from God's heavenly throne. Right? It's totally spiritual. So God has to cajole the soul to want to go into the body. The soul doesn't want to. God, slaps the soul, so to speak, and he puts the soul into a body that's fitting for the soul. In other words, that soul's going to have, with the body, is going to have certain brothers and sisters, or maybe not, certain parents, go through certain things, but he's going to put in that body to do whatever it needs to do. Whatever potential it needs to reach, that's what it's going to do in that body. And for that person, that is only the potential he can reach. No one else can reach that potential except for him. So then what happens? It goes into the body. Where does the body come from? Body comes from the ground. Right? As the Torah says, it comes from the four corners of the earth when God created man. Right? When he created the body. So it comes from the ground. What does the ground represent? This world. Represents impurity. It represents impurity, and the soul is totally pure. In theory, we would think the soul goes into the body, should destroy the body. Because the soul is so pure. There's only one problem. Since the body is impure, once the soul goes into the body, right, the whole question when the soul comes into the body as well, whether it's the time of conception, whether when it's the baby's born, right, the soul goes in, whatever the case is, when the soul goes in, your body and soul together. But the thing is, that since the body, again, comes from the ground, and the ground is impure, because it represents this world, it's part of this world, once the soul gets in, it should destroy it, but it doesn't. Why not? Because the soul gets trapped. It's kind of like in an opaque prison. Because it's in an opaque prison, it can't shine. How does it shine in this world? It shines by the mitzvahs that it does. Right? That it's together, body and soul. So imagine, the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, the Ramchal says that the first man that was created was as close as we know as a pure soul in this world. So all he had to do was continue to grow spiritually. Had he done what he was supposed to do, he would have grown spiritually. Essentially, his body would have left, would have just been a shell pretty much. He would have been a pure soul, would have walked straight into the Garden of Eden, straight into paradise, fulfilled its mission, fulfilled the world's mission. That's it, game over. Everything's great. Well, we know that's not what happened. So in theory, the soul is so powerful that if we feed it properly, it's still going to be in a body. But if we feed it properly, that body's going to look special. It's not going to look like everybody else. Why? Because the soul is being perfected. If the soul gets perfected, or it works on perfection at a high level, then yeah, you're looking at a human, but you're looking at something very special. You're looking at something that has a different type of glow than normal people. And the reason is because they've been working on themselves for so long spiritually. So I've had the merit to meet a number of these great people. They're human. You go like this and you pinch them, or you smack them, they'll say, ow. They eat, they sleep, they drink. They're human. No question. But they have a certain thing about them. There's like a certain aura. For lack of a better word, there's a certain aura that surrounds them. And that's the aura of Torah. And that the more a person works on themselves, the more, they can reach that level. But they have to work really hard to do it. So, in this case, body and soul. Now, when God judges body and soul after 120 years, both are going to be held liable. The body will say, what do you want from me? You can't punish me because I can't do anything without the soul. If the soul is not in the body dies. Right? So the body says, how can you punish me? The soul did everything. And then God looks at the soul, and the soul says, what do you want from me? I can't do anything if I'm not in a body. Right? I can't roam on the earth without a body, without, some outer armor. Can't do it. If that's the case, you can't judge me. You can't judge me. So God looks at both of them. Right? The body's saying, it's not my fault, it's the soul's fault. The soul's saying it's the body's fault. They're going back and forth. God says, all right, enough. Everyone out of the pool. And he slaps body and soul together, and he judges both of them. So the soul, so here, what did the Ramban say? So the Ramban here said that you have body and soul together. That when you sprinkle the blood, it corresponds to the blood of the body and soul together. So it's really for the body. He says that it's really the blood in his soul, but I mean the body here. So the Ramban here says when a person sins to God, he does it with both. That's why I got onto this, right? Because he sins with his body and his soul. You can't say, well, it's just the soul or it's just the body. It's both of them together. And it is fitting, says the Ramban, that you should spill his blood and burn his body because of what he's done. Now, that sounds a little bit harsh, because the reality is you sin against God, you should forfeit your life. Now, not every sin a person does is going to call for the death penalty. But the reality is, if I do something wrong, you distance yourself from God. If you distance yourself, you should forfeit your life. So the Ramban here says, if it wasn't for God's chesed, for God's loving kindness for man, that he allows you to take an animal and bring it up instead of you. That animal should have been you. So it's really blood for blood. The blood of the animal, guess what? It should have been you. Right? The blood for your blood, the soul for your soul, and all your bones. So, the Ramban says that makes a lot of sense. You're doing it for God's sake, but there's a lot of imagery here that would make sense. So, we can look at it like this. As we mentioned before, we have no connection. Right? These things that just mentioned, we have no connection. We've never seen an altar put up. We've never seen an animal go up. We've never seen God's, enjoyment of it, where the fire goes up and, God great pleasure. Right? Hard to imagine what that means. But the imagery is that what the animal goes through, especially when you bring a sin offering, the animal that goes up on the altar, well, guess who that should have been? That should have been you. Says the Vilna Gaon. Rav Elijah Vilna says that one thing he wanted to see before he died was what someone looked like before and after they brought a sacrifice. The reason is because the Vilna Gaon held, and it makes sense because I'll make it a little more graphic, the Vilna Gaon held that if someone brings a sin offering, and that sin offering should have been him, so it's going to make a tremendous impression. Because you're going to bring you bring the animal, the Kohen takes it, sacrifices it, and you're watching all the things to be done that should have been done to you. All these things correspond to man. Right? The blood, the soul, this, that, we just spoke about. Right? Rewind the tape. Right? But it corresponds to us. So the Vilna Gaon said, it can't be that a person would be the same before and after they gave the sacrifice. I'll tell a story. I think a relevant story. And that is, a number of years ago when I was in South America, in Santiago de Chile. So I went once when I was there to see animals be slaughtered. I thought for sure, I'd come back as a vegetarian, but, thank God you get over certain things. So seeing chickens wasn't so bad. Cows, okay, cows were a different story. So I remember there are different processes that go on, right, when an animal is killed. Right, you take the skin off, head comes off. All right, I hope no one's eating here. Right, they check the lungs. They want to make sure there are no abrasions in the lungs. Right, no holes in the lungs or whatever. Check that. Cut the animal up, and then you're going to have to salt it. And Right? The whole process, how it's done. So I was there helping out. So on one of the animals, I said to myself, let me see what happens from beginning to end. Right? Go step by step by step. So as the animal's being taken in, I tried to imagine, again, this is me. I'm not, not saying on any high level. Right? I'm a very simple person in many ways. But I tried to imagine what it would be like if I was supposed to bring the sacrifice, and that animal was supposed to be me. So I went step by step. Saw the animal come in, saw the ritual slaughter come in, kill it, and then all the different things that happened. Now, if you can imagine, right, all these things being done to the animal, and the reality is it should have been you. So I asked the $1 million question, how could a person not be affected? How could you be the same person if you saw it? Right, that's the whole purpose of what a sacrifice is. Right, we mentioned before, the word sacrifice is korban. The verb and the causative is lahakriv, right, same root, kuf resh beis. Means the same thing. Right? To draw close. But here, if you say it in the causative, it means it's causing you to draw close. Right? It's drawing close to death. That's what it's going close to, because it's going to die. So, now you would ask yourself, as we mentioned before, it sounds like a little archaic. Sounds medieval. We have no connection to this whatsoever. If we were to be there, we see fire come down, and suck it up, and we see all the other miracles that occurred in the temple with sacrifices in general, how could you not be affected? Unless your heart is hard as a rock, it's not possible. It's a big ordeal. You can take your animals, got to be sacrificed. It's not a non-expense, right? There's another command. And that is mitzvahs cost geld. Right? So here, do something, whatever. Even if let's say you bring a sacrifice, not for sin offering. Right? There was sacrifices that were brought in the morning, in the afternoon, not necessarily for a sin offering. Right? Because there's an obligation to bring offerings. Also, people went on the 3 festivals, Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuos, in order to bring sacrifices as well. Right? They're obligatory to be brought. So that's what we call Aliyah L'Regel. They went up to Jerusalem, to bring these sacrifices in the temple. So it's hard to imagine, with everything going on, that it's not going to affect the person. If, as the Ramban says, if it's true, that all these things correspond to the person, then all we have to do is imagine that it happened to us. If we imagine, again, I'm not saying you're sitting here for hours, going on the same mantra, death, animals, going up on the altar, imagine, being thrown on the altar and the blood's being thrown and but if we think about it a little bit, and we realize what it is, and what the purpose is, it doesn't sound so archaic, even if we've never seen it in our lifetime. Right? Even if it hasn't been done in the last 3,000 years. As the Vilna Gaon said, it should make a tremendous impression on a person. If it doesn't, that means the person's dead. Spiritually. He said it's not possible it doesn't. I mean, obviously, unless your soul is totally dead. then it can happen. But if you see it and you stay the same, that's a problem. Major problem. You cannot not be, it's hard to imagine. Someone who sees such a thing in such a process, and you realize it was really supposed to be you, it's a whole different ballgame. Because then you realize it's real. This world is real. It's about what I do. It's about what I think. It's about what I do for others. Or, God forbid, not do for others. It's about spiritual growth. If someone did something wrong and they got zapped, there's no free will. You have to have free will in order to make mistakes, or have the ability to make mistakes. Because if you didn't, and you were just programmed, right, then you can't be held responsible because you're programmed, right? Animals, unless they go outside of their DNA, which they can't unless, they learn terrible actions from man somehow. Like we mentioned by Parshas Noah, that you could have animals that learn that man's actions were so strong in the world, in the physical and the spiritual world, they even had effect on animals, right? So you could have males of the same species of birds, getting together. Right? It's not normal. Birds don't go out of their, what they're not supposed to do. Right? You're not going to have animals in different species trying to intermingle. You're certainly not going to have males trying to mate, with them. But if you're in a place where people do that, and you see what goes on, it has an effect. We may not think, animals don't learn from us. They don't, we don't understand what they say or what they do. Say, but what? I have an influence over an animal? So you see that is possible. Because the Torah talks about it, is one thing. Now we see it for real. Oh, now I'm a big believer. Why am I a big believer? Because I see it in front of my eyes. I see the Torah come alive. And if it didn't, it still wouldn't be true? No, it's still true. We're just lacking in belief. Imagine years ago, before there was such a thing as something to record. We know, and it's been brought down, that every action we do is being recorded, for better or for worse. And when God judges us, He's going to bring up all these angels that we create in our actions, and He's going to bring them up to give testimony. So yeah, we can know that. We can understand it, but how much do I really believe it? As my Rebbe always says, I never met anyone in that world that's been there and come back. So me being obnoxious, say, okay, so what's the answer? Whap! Oh, no, just kidding. Too late. But we don't know. We have heard people that have had out-of-body experiences when they were clinically dead and what they saw. But before any of this, let's say, before any recordings, we didn't believe. People didn't believe, even though they didn't see it, they didn't hear about it. But because the Torah, the Zohar says it, it doesn't exist. Right? That's what some people will say. If I can't see it, I can't fathom it, it doesn't exist. Okay, so we're living in a very weak generation. So God says, fine, you don't think it exists? I'm going to work on your belief in me. How am I going to do that? I'm going to show you there are things that record. Right? You had tapes. Now you got MP3s. Right? No one has tapes anymore, right? You got phones that record. Before they had VCRs. Now you got DVRs. So what's the point? God's showing you, if you can see something in this world that you're talking and it's being recorded just like we're doing now, And it says in the Zohar and other places that all your actions are going to be recorded. You can say, how's that going to happen? Well, if it can happen like this, and then it goes on YouTube and whoever sees it, and it goes viral, then it's real because it's being recorded. So now we have an idea what it means. Right? Regardless of people who had out-of-body experiences and came back and verify exactly what the Zohar says. See, we're big believers when I have it in my hand. Right? When someone's got money in the bank, he's got all the belief in God. When he's living day by day, it's much harder. It's what the people in the desert went through. We'll speak about that when we get there. God wanted them to be in a tremendously high level. Day in and day out. They had to live at this high level. See, but some of us are the biggest believers because, we got a big bank account or we have something in there. Gives us strength because, we're looking at it. I don't have to use it. But if a person's really struggling, he's got for today, but he doesn't know what's going to be tomorrow, and he still believes God's going to take care of him, that's a high level. Doesn't mean you don't have to put your best foot forward and say, okay, God, take care of me. Doesn't work like that for most people. See, the biggest belief is when the chips are down. And when the chips are down, the question is how much you believe now. When you had it easy and things were going good and you didn't have so many problems here and there, of course you're a believer. Everything's going good. When you're seemingly thrown to the lions and your life is turned upside down, that's when the test is. That's when we see the difference between the men and the boys and what they believe. Because if you get thrown to the lions and you pick yourself up and you still continue to believe and your belief is even stronger, then you're the real deal. Because your belief isn't strong when you get money in the bank. Your belief is even stronger even when you don't have. Because then what you say is, God, you put me in this position. I have 100% faith you eventually are going to take me out of this. But you see, I can't do it myself. You are the one that has to help. Right? And that's what we spoke about last week in Parshas Vayikra. You put in your best effort, God does the rest. And your salvation may come from a place where you never thought it would. But the belief is, even if it didn't come from what you're doing, the higher level is, don't worry. Even if I put in the best effort and I didn't get the desired result, don't worry. God's still looking out for you. He's going to make it happen one way or another. In a way, in probably 1,000,000, trillion, zillion years, you never even dreamed of. Which is most likely the case. Maybe every once in a blue moon, things go according to plan. You put your effort in and it comes out that way. Doesn't always work that way. Just because a person worked hard at a specific thing doesn't mean you get the desired result. But you see, even if you don't, that's where the work is. Because, well, I did what I was supposed to do. God has to do the rest. But you see, you got to let God do the rest. When we live in an upside down world, which we live in now. I spoke about this way back months ago. Go see my video on my channel at Rabbi Chaim Coffman on YouTube. I spoke about the proper reaction to what's going with all the terror going on, especially here in Israel. It's to make you say one thing. And it ain't, I got my Louisville Slugger. That ain't it. The one thing you say is ain, or it's actually 3 words. 3 words, 1 statement. We'll make it easy. Ain od milvadoi. That's it. That should be on every person's lips. There's no one else but Him. Him! He runs the world. Because He runs the world makes no difference what you do. In this case, we have no one else to rely on. You know, it's not the SWAT teams. It's not the army. It's not nuclear weapons. You know, people can do things just with knives, scissors, and they can come out of nowhere. You're walking down the street, you have no idea, boom, knife in your back, God forbid. How do you stop that? You don't. There's no way to stop it. But you say, ain't no milvado. He's the only one we can rely on. So when you walk out the door, that's on your lips. So here, just to end, you know, the whole purpose and all the mitzvahs that we do are for His sake. Not for any other reason. Because we believe it's the absolute will of God. So the Ramban here said that's the point of sacrifices. And when we do them, even if we don't feel it today, but it draws us close. And if we think in our minds, like we mentioned before, of us actually going through it and that animal is supposed to be us, hopefully we think differently and we live our lives differently. Just want to mention also that I started a new class on Derech Hashem, the Way of God. It's a great book. Talks about man and God and why God created the world. Souls, where the soul comes from. The evil inclination against the good inclination. Divine providence, prophecy. It's a great class I give once a week. Anyone interested can contact me, Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com. I also give conversion classes. You can take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversions to Judaism. I started a new Facebook group called Orthodox Conversion, The Real Deal, right? You look up The Real Deal or Orthodox Conversion, The Real Deal, right? You'll see it there. Also, my blog, rabbichaimcoffman.blogspot.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN.blogspot.com. Everyone have a great Shabbos.